Well, hello out there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching us on the live show or on the replay. We're so happy to have you here. And, I am so excited to have Dr. Robyn Odegaard here with me today. And, I met you, Robyn, through a mutual friend, and we chatted a couple of weeks ago. And ever since then, I've been so excited to, pick up this conversation. You are so cool and smart and funny. So before we get started with our conversation, please can you just share a little bit about kind of, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I am a former competitive beach volleyball player turned high performance psychologist with continuing education in nutrition. And that's a whole bunch of words to basically say my clients call me a smoke jumper. I parachute in and help fight life's fires from the inside. And some people say, oh, I'm so glad I get to talk to you because I can unload and not know what's going on. And it doesn't negatively affect my stock price. So I'm kind of that consigliere for my clients. A little bit of fun facts about me. I like to teach my dog circus tricks, and I have way too many houseplants.
Okay, well, I'll have to get some tips from you after the show on some of that. So, I love the idea of creating success out of chaos. And I see on your profile that you say you work with interesting, committed individuals who want more than incremental change. Now, I have a few thoughts on what that might mean, but if you can share and sort of clarify what what you mean by that.
Yeah. So my clients are usually the people who have achieved great things in life. They've done all the things and then something has broken, whether they might be going through a divorce, maybe their business partner suddenly went off the deep end, maybe they've decided that life isn't as fun as it used to be, but they're at a crossroads. And you hear a lot of people say you come up against a brick wall, you have to decide whether you're going to go over it, under it, around it. The people I work with are at that brick wall and they're trying to decide if they should just die there. They're just that finished. And so they want something more than just, oh, let's knock down the wall. They need more than that.
Wow. Okay. So would you say that does this generally relate to professional? Because you had mentioned professional, or is it personal, or is it a combination?
It's all of it. And I believe that as humans, there's no way to separate chaos in your professional life from chaos in your personal life. If you have chaos in your life, it affects everything across the board. And so that's what I bring to my clients. And I don't charge by the hour because I think it's a conflict of interest. Chaos doesn't happen on a schedule. If my clients need me, if I'm awake, I do my best to be available. Text, email, call me, whatever. Send a pigeon. Actually, no, pigeons don't do very well. But anyway, reach out to me if you're a client and you need me.
I remember you telling me that, and that commitment on your part is, I would say, quite unusual.
It
Quite
is.
unusual, and
Mhm.
I'm sure that it's much appreciated. And you've already mentioned this briefly about being the professional, the athlete, and it seems to me that this would be a big shift. And I know that I read that you sort of combine the mindset that you got from being this athlete with your emotional intelligence expertise. And so it seems that this would be focusing mostly on mindset, but is that true or
It's
no?
not true in the way mindset is usually used. So mindset is typically used in a woo-woo type of way. Like if you think it, it will happen. That's
Mhm.
not really the way I do it. The work that I do that usually has a foundation. And my most powerful question I like to ask my clients is, what does your most fulfilled life look like? Because being able to answer that question gives us, what do you have that isn't working? What do you have that is working? And what do you have that we need to add? And then I kind of have 5 pieces, for lack of a better way to put it, of the puzzle that come together. One is, once you ask, what does your most fulfilled life look like? It gives you a vision. It gives you the idea of, where are we headed? What do we want to accomplish? And sometimes that's a hard question to answer. But once you know that, then you can figure out strategy. You can figure out skill sets, which is, what do we need to add? What do we need to learn? Who do we need to hire? Those 3 are the easy part. The next 2 are the hard part. The fourth one is What are your psychological barriers? What are your saboteurs? What's getting in your way? I'm a psychologist. I have to say it. What is your mother saying in your head? You know, those kind of things get in the way. And then the last piece, you can call it energy, you can call it connection, but people, places, things, and habits that are either helping or hurting. And those 5 pieces, those buckets, if you will, are kind of how I work with clients on what is their most fulfilled life and how do we create it.
You know, that sounds so logical to me. When you go through it, it sounds so logical that
Mhm.
you're kind of working from the inside out, but then doing the work sort of on, more also on the outside. And, since you're here and we have people listening, what are a few tips that you can give to people that, if they're feeling like their life is chaotic and they need to shift things, a couple of things that they might be able to do, like today?
All right. So the first thing, obviously, answer the question, what does your most fulfilled life look like? And that is a super hard question to answer. I know I said that, I'm repeating it because it's hard to answer it by yourself. Even I have trouble. If I were to sit down with a piece of paper and be like, what does my most fulfilled life look like? I would have trouble articulating that by myself. Having someone to kind of talk through that with you and say, oh, I'm hearing this. Oh, but what about that? Have you thought about this? And not tell you, but be able to, I use motivational interviewing. That's kind of the foundation because I was in a motivational interviewing lab when I was in undergrad, but asking you those questions, those intuitive questions of where are you going? What do you want? So that's the first thing. If you don't know what your most fulfilled life looks like, you're never going to be able to create it. And then from there, being able to kind of pinpoint, if you want a tip, what is helping and what is hurting. Those are the super easy foundational. This is where I want to get. What is helping? What is hurting?
It's interesting, and I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit because I want to talk to you about your TED Talk a little bit down the road because I just absolutely love that.
Well, thank
But
you.
this just brings to mind the idea that you mentioned in the TED Talk, the idea of the frenemies that people have. And, it's so often when you are succeeding at something. I found this when I decided to go back to college. I told you I had dropped out. And when I went back, I was in my late 20s and I, had a whole life. And um, it was, since I was working, it really took a lot out of my time with my friends. And a lot of them were just not so happy about that. So, can you share just a little bit about that and the whole
Yeah.
frenemy thing and how to deal with that?
So the first thing is, and this is, I don't know, cliche, but no one has a problem with your boundaries unless they're trying to cross them. And the same thing is true with your friends. Your friends are only your friends if they can get something out of you, then are they really a friend? And I did a quick hits recently about what makes someone a friend. How do you know if someone's your friend? And that is a really hard conversation to have. And for some people, they're your friend because they want something from you. And if you aren't any longer able to support that, then they're going to be upset. They're going to want to cross that boundary, whatever it is. And you have to decide, is the price that I pay for this friendship and what I get out of it worth it? And it sounds very mercenary, but that's the reality of friendship.
No, it is so true. And I have to say, well, I have many, acquaintances and professional friends. I have just a handful of friends, and they're mostly
Mhm.
people that I add to it, but they're people I've known forever, and they are there no matter what. They're just there whether you have time for them or you don't. And if you don't talk for a year, you pick it right up when you connect again. So
Mhm.
I thank you for that. And I'm glad that you just mentioned the quick hits because I want to talk to you about that. Now, that's how, we were introduced with the idea of, learning more about the quick hits. And you are the creator and the host of the show. And
Mhm.
you bring, experts, people together to talk about, a various topic that you choose for that session. And it's only 10 minutes. So, what was kind of the impetus for you to set this up?
Yeah. So originally, what had happened with COVID, all of my corporate training and public speaking gigs went away. And what I realized was I was left with my one-on-one clients, which are awesome, and I love that aspect of my business. And I missed the I call them cocktail conversations. Those conversations that you have with groups of people that are stimulating and interesting. They don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but they're stimulating and interesting. And I was in a peer group with some of my peers, I guess. I was going to say friends, but peers is the right answer. And I was saying how I missed having these kind of interesting conversations. And a little further on in the conversation, one of the other women said, "Oh, I wish I had stuff to post on social media. I don't have anything to post." And that was a light bulb moment. I was like, wait a minute. What if I just created these interesting conversations and we could post them? And originally the plan was we were going to do one a week and they'd be like 15 minutes. Two things were wrong with that. One, LinkedIn wouldn't let me post a 15-minute video. And two, within about a month, I could not get 3 people from my peer group to show up to have conversations. And so I went back to them and I said, look, I know this idea was born here, but do you mind if I kind of run with it? And they said, yeah, do whatever you want. So I started inviting friends and colleagues and clients and former clients. I felt like a puppy dog, like, come play with me. This is fun. And I made them 10 minutes because that's what LinkedIn would let me post natively on LinkedIn. And it started out as 1 a week, then it was 3, and now it's 5. And I'm wondering, should I go back to 3 because 5 is a lot? But I've done about 275 episodes. I have about 300-ish people who are on the list who are like, yes, invite me to do quick hits. And so I do a random number generator where I'm like, all right, who gets invited this week? And we get to have interesting conversations about the human condition.
I absolutely love that. And I will say that's part of what I love about doing the LinkedIn Lives that I do. I get to have interesting people come on and talk to me. I learn, which is part of it. I learn, I enjoy the conversations. That's one of the things that I miss about school. That's what I miss. I was an English major as an undergrad. And so we'd read all these interesting books, which of course I loved, and the discussions and, how it relates to life, et cetera. I miss that myself. That's the one thing if I had no work to do, I would be a student for life because it's just so, it's so much fun. And you just don't often get the opportunity to have those types of conversation. And
that's why I love to audit classes.
Oh.
I go online. So there's a website called Coursera.org where you can audit classes all over the world. I've taken courses at University of Edinburgh. That's exactly why I love to audit classes, because you get to have those conversations and learn interesting things. And
well, see, I love that. I learn every time. And as a bonus, the people that watch live or on the replay, they get to learn as well. So, I really loved your TED Talk, and I'd like to, spend a little time talking about that. You delve into the whole idea of imposter syndrome, and I don't know. I think most people suffer from that at one time or another. If you don't, it rings a bell to me that maybe there's something not right. If you never feel like, what am I doing here? Then
if you are a psychologically healthy human, you are periodically going to say, wait a minute, I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's so true. So I struggled with that a lot when I was younger, just being not encouraged to grow or anything, just, smile and be pretty. And, that's what we want from you. But what prompted you to choose that topic? And if you can share just a little bit from, what you do talk about in the TED Talk.
Yeah. So I knew the organizer of the TEDx Wilmington Women, and he had asked me to submit a talk. And so I did. I submitted a talk based on my expertise, and it got rejected. He said, no, I don't want you to talk about that. And I was like, you asked me to submit a talk, and I did. And he's like, that's not what I want from you. I want more of your life experience. I want more of what made you the person you are, because that's what's impressive about you. Yes, you're bright and blah, blah, all the things, but your life experience is what makes you interesting. And so then I had to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, what can I talk about in 6 minutes that's going to be useful? And that's where this idea of my history of being told I was average and being told that the only reason I ever succeeded was because someone else more qualified didn't try, how that affected me, how that shaped me, how I've overcome it. Some days I overcome it better than others. And then what I've done to kind of work through that. So that I call the talk Creating Success Out of Chaos. And that's kind of where the idea of that's what I do and that's what the tagline of my business is came from. And then the last thing I say in that talk, and I do encourage people to go and watch it, but is when you learn there's no water in a well, stop going there looking for a drink. And that goes back to the idea that there are people who should love you and should support you and should be kind to you and should be your cheerleader who just aren't. And you have to accept that when someone shows you who they are, believe them and remember it and stop going there for support that they don't have to offer.
Yeah, obviously I can relate to that. I think everybody can relate to that. What is the biggest takeaway because you say that in the TED Talk, the one thing that you ask people is about going, is the well empty, right? I think that's the question that you had. So what is your biggest takeaway for people who, see that the well is empty for this person? It could be a parent and what is your suggestion of a way that somebody might be able to kind of deal with that and turn it into like some kind of a positive for themselves?
So the thing is, first you have to recognize it, and then you have to decide you are going to do something about it and what that means. And you have to come to grips with losing the relationship as you wish it were. I think that's one of the hardest things, is mourning the relationship you wish that was. I think a lot of us spend a lot of time trying to have relationships that I remember I had someone in my life one time, and I used to think, if I can just explain this to him in a way that he understands it, we can have a really good relationship. And I spent years trying to explain what I needed and having him say, yes, I can do that. And then having him not do it. And so coming to grips with that, this relationship is not going to be what I wish it was. And that's something I work with my clients often. Yeah. How do you let go of that? And then once you're able to recognize this is not going to be what I want it to be, then what can it be? There are some people in my life who I love very dearly who do not get full 100% access to my life because they are damaging. And I know that if I'm going to have conversations with them, they have to be around very boundaried topics. I love you. I can talk to you about XYZ thing that is important to you. We will not talk about XYZ thing that is important to me because I know that it's going to get ugly and you're going to hurt me. And I have very strict rules about that. If they ask a question, I am very shallow about, oh yeah, that's going great. And I move on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear that. I hear that. And it seems also part of the idea of knowing that there are some things where I may feel one way and my friend feels something the other way. And, it upsets me that they feel that way, but, that's the way, that's them and that's me. And then we have our relationship, which is kind of, a separate entity. I don't know. That's probably not the right way to put it, but.
But yeah. You have to allow people to feel differently than you and that be okay.
Yeah, it is hard though. It is hard though. And I would imagine that the people that come and seek you out and work with you, they are introspective by nature. I mean, they want to look within. I am one of those people. But what about people who are not introspective? I have a couple people close to me in my life, and I wish they were introspective because I think that would improve the relationship that they have with me and with other people as well. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts for them?
So I am very fortunate that the people who self-select to work with me do so because they want change and they want to control the things they can control, which is themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't get people who come to me and say, oh, I'm going to work with you, fix that person. That's not a thing. We don't get to do that. Now, do sometimes my clients be like, I wish so-and-so was different. Yes. And we have that conversation and you're allowed to wish someone was different. And you're allowed to wish that if they were just different, then this would be better. But you don't get to control that. And as humans, we spend so much time trying to control the uncontrollable that we forget to control our controllables. I know, it's so frustrating, but that's the reality. We can look at, and it's so much easier to look at somebody else's life and say, oh, if they would just fix this one thing. I'm sure there's something about me that somebody out there is going, if she would just fix that one thing.
Yeah, yeah. It is so difficult. And I have just started reading a business book. I've been trying to work more fiction into my reading because I miss it and I love it when I'm reading it. But I just started reading a business book, and the first chapter starts with, you are responsible for your life. You are responsible for what is going on with you. And you know, I know that intellectually, but it's very difficult not to say, well, you know, it would be this or it would be that. And, you know, some of the clients that I work with, I mean, you know, I'm not a therapist, or I'm not a emotional, you know, intelligence coach or anything like that. But they struggle with being concerned about, say, something like ageism, where they feel, and I've had girlfriends of mine, personal friends, tell me they felt it starting at like 40. And it, you know, it affects men as well as women. But the thing is, yes, it's out there, but you can't control that. And if you do think that it's ageism and you are expecting it, you are going to see it when it's not even there.
Yeah. I have clients who say to me, so and so always fights with me. And I'm like, you're fighting back. If you don't want to go around the circle, don't go around the circle. And that's true about ageism too. Yes, it's out there. Absolutely. I agree with you. It happens and it's awful. And I hate that people do that. But you can either get on your soapbox and be mad and beat the drum and be annoyed, or you can say, okay, well then how do I work around that? What do I do? What are my options?
Yeah, yeah. I love that, and I appreciate you going there with me. So I also noticed that you're an author. You have 3 books that I was looking at. One was How to Feed a Human, which I thought was interesting. Stop the Drama: The Ultimate Guide to Female Teams. And the third book is The Ultimate Guide to Handling Every Disagreement Every Time. Now, my first thought,
I had them all 3. I held them up as you said them.
Awesome. So my first thought is, and you know, I would like to maybe touch on that, the whole idea of you know, having, because we are talking about communication styles and productive conflicts, and the idea of, you know, winning these conversations, winning the disagreements. And maybe it's
Can I pause you just a second?
Yes, of course.
Don't love the word winning. Don't love the word winning, because
okay.
that suggests that someone's losing.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, that is so important. I'm glad that you said that. And my first thought is the handling the disagreements, and I would like you to give us a couple of thoughts on that, and then I want to move on to something else. So if you just give us a couple of shares on that.
So the reason that I am confident to be able to write a book that says you can handle every disagreement every time is because the whole point of this book is how to manage yourself. How do I handle myself in a disagreement? Because that's, again, the one thing you get to control is you. And so the one tip, if I were going to give you one tip from this book, it is to recognize your psychosomatic response to disagreement. And that means when something happens, how does your body respond? Because that's going to be your first and only tip that you are about to escalate into a spiral and an awful conversation. So if you can recognize, for me, I get a gut feeling right in my gut. I get that, and I'm like, okay, pause, breathe, hold on, hang on to your emotions. And if you can wait for that flood of your emotional brain freaking out and wait for it to dissipate, then your logical brain, the part of your brain you want engaged in a conversation, will come back online. But if you've ever been in a situation where you've thought of the perfect thing to say after the argument was over, your emotional brain was involved in the conversation, not your logical brain.
You know, you are speaking directly to me, because I know some people, you know, are conflict, you know, they want to avoid conflict, and they will, you know, will turn and walk away or whatever. And I am the opposite. I am just, and I do, I have that it's a flaw where I think about it as, you know, winning. And, you know, I am just not one to back down. I mean, you know, this doesn't happen in a business setting, but in personal settings where, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, And it's so difficult, particularly if you're dealing with someone who is the opposite communication style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I call it kitchen sinking, which is when you come into a disagreement and you throw everything at it, including the kitchen sink, and you end up in a conversation that's 20 minutes later, you're like, wait, we're arguing about something different than we were arguing about a minute ago. But recognizing these things in yourself and being able to say, okay, so I'm a high flame arguer, whatever that means to you. I'm going to try and turn that flame down a little bit and try to have conversations rather than disagreements. And what does that look like? And what does it look like to be able to say, I don't have to win, I have to understand?
Oh, goodness. Thank you. That is, yeah, I'm going to have to watch this replay myself over and over and over again. So I do want to, we have a comment from someone in the audience. My friend Tina is joining us from Belgium. And she says, the one thing that we can control is ourselves. Love to see the 3 books. Which one would you recommend to start with? Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, cool. So the first book, the first one I wrote, which was Stop the Drama, The Ultimate Guide to Female Teams, that one is based on my dissertation, which I did a team development program for a D1 swim team. So it's very focused on athletes. It was written for female athletes, their parents and coaches. So there's a lot of great tips in it, but that probably, unless you are a female athlete or you have one that you love, this would not be where I would start.
Okay.
The second one, which is Handling Every Disagreement Every Time, this one was written specifically for the business world. It is where most people get entry into my world, is through this book. Thank you to my husband for making this amazing cover. He is a graphic designer and did a great job. And then the How to Feed the Human book. This is just the story of my husband and I's journey to becoming more plant-based when we got to be of a certain age and wondered why. We're both former competitive athletes, why our bodies weren't agreeing with us. So this is a different subject matter than the other two. So if you're interested in moving to plant-based, then this book. But usually most people start with The Ultimate Guide to Handling Every Disagreement Every Time.
And, that was my first thought. But then also when I was looking at the How to Feed a Human, and I noticed that was your most recent book.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that you were writing it with your husband. I didn't make that connection. But it also, I thought it was interesting because it seemed very goal focused. And my thought was that, the idea of setting goals and achieving achieving what you want, it could be very related to business as well.
It absolutely can be. The thing that trips people up with recognizing the goal focused and How to Feed a Human is that people have a very knee-jerk reaction when you talk to them about food. Because if I talk to you about how you eat, I am directly talking to you about your mother and how she taught you to feed yourself at an unconscious level. And so a lot of people get lost in the weeds when it comes to that, because I am not telling you have to be plant-based. That just happens to be where we ended up when we looked at the science and when we tried different things and what worked for our bodies. And that's what this is written, is if you want to move toward eating more vegetables, more plant-based proteins, understanding why plant-based protein is healthier than animal-based protein, et cetera, then this book is for you. If you don't, it's not. Don't read it. Don't argue with me.
Okay. Well, it's funny because I am a bit of sort of an amateur foodie. I like to cook. I have all the different gadgets and things. And, I adore my stand mixer. I just like, there's so many things that, I enjoy it, which is not the cooking dinner every night, but the, preparing new dishes. And when I think about it though, I grew up on, mac and cheese and frozen dinners. So for me, it was like the flip side, because my mom just really did not cook anything that it, kind of threw me the other way. But
I grew up on a beef ranch, so I'm very different from the way I grew up.
Oh God, my husband would die for that. He would live on steak and spaghetti. He would eat nothing but steak and spaghetti if I would allow it. So you mentioned your background, and I mentioned it also about, being a competitive athlete. Is that what led you to sort of coaching and training? I mean, it seems like a natural, move to me. Was it like that?
So I have always been the person that people came to for advice. When I was working in corporate, I had another manager bring an employee to me and say, here, can you talk to her? Her boyfriend just held a gun to her head for 2 hours. and left her in my office. And I'm like, I'm the technology manager. But I did. I talked to her. I ended up going to her house. We hid the guns. I moved her out, like all this craziness. So I was always that person that people would come and talk to. And then as an athlete, the thing that really stuck out to me was I was a good volleyball player, but there were days I would get on the sand and I could not figure it out to save my life. And I just wasn't on. And I saw that in my competitors and my colleagues as well. And so when I had the opportunity to go to college when I was 32, I knew I wanted to understand the human condition. I wanted to know what makes us succeed. How do we get the most out of our potential? And why is it that sometimes, even when I'm doing something that I'm really good at and I really love, I just don't do it well? And so that's kind of where I started the conversation with psychology and who I have become.
Well, one of the things that I hear, and this saying persists, of do what you love and the money will follow. And that is something, when I hear that, I cringe. And I cringe for because maybe so and maybe not. I may love to play the guitar, but that doesn't mean that I can make a living at it. And another thing to think about is, once you are doing it as your job, then it's work. It's not the hobby anymore. And there are different expectations.
Yep. That's why I train my dog circuits tricks, and we do them for kids in the Home Depot, and we don't compete. Because it's fun. I enjoy doing it. She enjoys doing it. And there's no pressure. If I ask her, to jump on my back and she's like, I don't want to do that today, I'm like, okay, you don't want to do that today. No points off. Who cares?
Yeah. Hey, I wish you lived near me, because I gravitate towards dogs in Home Depot, and we have 2 dogs here. So they always love to be around me as well, and, sniff me up and down. So that's always a treat for me. It sounds weird, but it's a treat for me. So, what do you enjoy most about what you do?
About my work, or about my dog training, or about my plants?
Whatever.
About my bike riding?
About anything, I'm asking in a professional, but I'd be interested to see, of the outside things, what you
Yeah. So professionally, the thing I love the most is the intense, intimate relationship I have with my clients. And I mean that at an emotional level. So I'll give you an example. Last fall, I got a call from a client on a Saturday, and he said to me, Robyn, my father just went on life support. I'm the executor. You have to help me decide if I'm going to kill my dad. And I spent 2 hours on the phone with him, and it had nothing to do with the medical situation. I was helping him handle his brothers and his wife and his children, and asking the question over and over and over, what would your father want? And just being there to support, having that kind of trust and that kind of relationship with another human being is really special. And I love that about the work that I get to do.
As I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm also thinking that, because it sounds like you are there to guide, to listen and to guide, but not to tell. And I find that sometimes with people, who I know who are in, like a coaching profession, if you are talking to them about something, they are it's kind of like, well, try this or try that, or I mean, so how do you avoid that? And even, just on a personal basis, if I'm talking to my husband about something and I have the urge to say, well, do this, do that, but that's not the best way to go about it. So
Yeah.
what can you share about that?
Here's the thing about the coaching profession. Coaching is a very, very deep pool full of very shallow people. The easiest thing to do when you coach someone is unpack an emotional trunk in their attic. Take all the things out, look at all the things, talk about all the stuff, tell them what they should do. The hardest thing to do is, now you've got all this stuff laying all over their attic, is figure out, what do you do with it? And so many coaches go in and they unpack people's trunks or boxes, and they leave stuff laying all over their emotional attic, and they say, oh, look, your trunk's empty, you're all better. And what they've done is created a mess for the people to trip over things that they didn't even know were problems, that are now problems because they're no longer packed away in the box they had them in. And so for me, My goal is if I take something out of a box and we look at it, and I'm talking about the emotional space, and we look at it, I want to make sure we don't leave it laying around where it's going to get tripped over. And if I say you should, that is giving them the opportunity to go, well, that's not going to work for me. Let me set it over here on this table. So instead, what I will say is, well, in my experience, I've seen this, or someone I know did that, or I tried this. What if you did it this way? What might it look like if? And we explore it in the abstract before they might say, maybe let me try that. Or, you know what? I don't think that's right for me right now. And I've had situations where I've done that and a client has said, nope, that's not right for me. And then down the road, I'll get a text and say, hey, can we revisit that? I think I do need your help on that.
Yeah, that's very helpful and very interesting. You have shared quite a few things like about the plants and the dog and everything, but what's something that would surprise people about you?
I learned to juggle by practicing for 11 hours straight.
Okay. And what made you do that?
So I was in my 20s and my best friend at the time mentioned that she had learned to juggle for an acting class. And I was like, wait, you know how to juggle? And she's like, yes. I'm like, you must show me. And so we got tennis balls, which are the worst thing. Do not learn to juggle with tennis balls. But that's what we had. So we got tennis balls and she showed me, and I was just stubborn. And I wanted to learn to juggle. And so I did. Like we took, bathroom breaks and food breaks or whatever. But for 11 hours, I basically messed with these tennis balls until I could get to the point where I was like, okay, now I can juggle.
Wow. I've always thought that that's one of the most fun things about acting. I wouldn't want to be an actor or an actress, but the fact that they get to learn and do all these different things, for roles that they are preparing for. And I think that would be so fun to be an actor just for that reason.
You can learn stuff.
Yeah, just to learn stuff. Learning. Yeah, I could just be learning all the time, and that would be, if that was my life, that would be perfect. So, but I don't see that happening, at least not anytime soon. So, so when you think about your career, what would you say is the biggest the mistake, really not the biggest mistake, but the mistake that has taught you the biggest lesson?
Oof. Well, I could go all the way back to when I worked in corporate and talk about how I didn't do a good job of championing myself. But if I had championed myself, would I still be in corporate? So maybe that wasn't a mistake. In my business, and this is something I need to do a quick hits about it, but how do you tell the difference between someone who is really good at what they do and charges a price that is premium because they're good at it, and someone who is a charlatan and charges a premium for something they can't actually do? And I have, on more than one occasion in my life, hired someone to help me with something and they couldn't actually do it, and it cost me thousands of dollars. So that's a mistake that I definitely look out for. And I don't know the answer. How do you tell the difference? I don't know.
It is tough. It is difficult. And I know with a lot of professions, for example, I work with clients to do personal branding, and resumes and things like that are part of it. But, anybody, I know people who are resume writers and do LinkedIn, they're LinkedIn trainers. And, a couple of weeks ago, they were selling insurance. I mean, it's just because at least, you have the credentials, you have the education, and you talk a lot about that on your LinkedIn profile, the ongoing professional development that you do.
Yes, and that's true. I have a lot of background. I have a resume that would intimidate me if it wasn't mine. But the way that I let potential clients know that I am real and that I'm not a charlatan is I offer a powerful conversation, and it doesn't have a price tag on it. It is pay what you think it's worth. And I spend 2 hours with someone before I invite them to be a client, because I want to know that they're committed to the work. And I want them to know that all of these pieces of paper aren't just paper, that I have the real life experience and knowledge to back it up.
Yeah. So I often tell people that it's work for them as well, because I don't write fiction. It sounds like with you don't have a crystal ball. So they have to do the work as well. It's not
And well, they have to be willing to be in it. Just hiring me to check a box and say, okay, now I have someone who helps me, that's not going to get it. If you want to create change, you have to be in it. You have to text me when it's hard. You have to let me know when something isn't working. You have to let me know when you're not okay. That's the whole point of having someone like me, of having a rock in your life, is not having to be the rock all of the time. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to admit, is to say, I'm not okay. And it's safe for me to say that to you.
Change is so hard. It's so hard. It's so easy, as you had mentioned, the idea of, well, I can look at somebody else and say, oh, if they just did this. But to look, to look at yourself and then even see that I need to do this. You're talking about the high flame, argument, someone who's disagreeing with a high flame person. And, that's me for sure. I mean, it's definitely me, and it gets me into trouble. But working on that, it's difficult. So I want to thank you for all this. And as we are getting sort of near the end, I want to ask, is there something that that we haven't discussed, that I haven't asked you, that you would like to share that you think is important?
Oh, goodness. That's a big, wide open question, isn't it?
I know.
Wow. So I want to go back to the idea of people living their most fulfilled life. I think that a lot of people don't realize that they get to, like, that's a thing. You're allowed to live your most fulfilled life. And so many of us, when we get to be a certain age, have gotten off track from what that is and what that looks like. And you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to live the life that you've created just because you created it. You can change tracks. And I think for a lot of people, I have a client who talks about the golden handcuffs, where she feels like she's trapped in the job that she has because she's good at it and they pay her a lot, but it's killing her soul. So here's the question that I like to ask in that case. How much would you have to be paid to give away your health on purpose?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And is that something that when people answer that, is that something that they know when it's really time to leave the job or relationship or whatever?
Sometimes they decide it's worth it. And I don't get to choose that. I don't get to say this would be the best choice for you. I just get to ask the questions. And for some people, when I ask that question, it's eye-opening and they run away and they don't want to talk about it. And then they have to come back a little later. And that, I get it. It's hard. It's hard. That's welcome to being a human. Welcome to the human condition.
Yeah, being a human is tough, right?
I wouldn't trade it though.
Yeah, me either. I don't know. Maybe if I could be one of our dogs, that might be kind of cool though too. Or maybe your dog doing circus tricks. So I thank you again so much for joining me today. I have loved this conversation. I'm so glad that I met you, and look forward to chatting with you on your show.
Yeah, I look forward to having you on Quick Hits. And absolutely, if anyone wants to be on Quick Hits, I'm always looking for interesting people to be panelists. So reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, let me know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And everyone else, have a great rest of your day.